How we got here. How we got here, John. Today we talk vaccines.
That's right. We were just talking about how it's getting rolled out right here in South Korea. And it's kind of great. We're seeing people kind of getting excited, getting ready to go back to life, except for Katie, who's going to take a nap, which is, hey, that's cool. It's been around forever. Right? You know where I'm going with this. It's been around much longer than we expected.
Yep.
Ancient China and ancient India are two that researchers say are possible origins for vaccines, right? But they don't really know because they have written records from the 1500s from both those countries.
Okay.
But they figure if they're written records in the 1500s, they've been inoculating people for years before that.
So doctors figured it out. And a vaccine is a dose of the disease, right?
That's right. It's
Which
like,
it seems so counterintuitive to me, right?
And you got to imagine, centuries ago, these people had no idea of science that we do now. But they were just experimenting on hunches, and they got it right. And the whole thing was smallpox. All right, smallpox has been with us since the dawn of humanity, and it would just keep coming back in epidemic waves. So way back when, somebody in China and India decided, I'm going to give some of this stuff to healthy people and see what happens. And that's the concept of inoculation.
Yeah.
Because that sounds like a great idea.
It seems like the worst idea in the world. It's so counterintuitive.
It really is. But this whole concept of inoculation is what helped create today's vaccines. So people in ancient China and India figured, just giving a small bit, like in China, what they did was they made a powder from dried smallpox scabs.
Okay.
And blew it into the nose of a healthy person.
Wow.
To give them a small dose of smallpox.
Goodness me. That's an awful way to receive your vaccination treatment.
You're not going to like this next one.
Okay.
In India, they dipped a sharp needle into smallpox pus. You know that gross liquid thing that oozes from scabs?
Yeah.
And then they pricked it into the arm of healthy people many times. Both ideas kind of worked, and people are like, wait, this is fantastic because it gave healthy people just enough of that virus so their immune systems would kill it, but most importantly, would remember the virus the next time it encountered it.
That's the idea, right? So your body learns what it is and learns that it's the enemy and learns how to fight it off.
That's right. That's inoculation, intentionally inducing immunity against a disease. And this concept would be the foundation for all vaccines following that.
Yeah, it's really kind of fascinating, isn't it? The way, and I mean, the older methods sound really awful, but I guess at that time, then you work with the tools that you have available to you, right?
Yeah, I'm just surprised that they even thought of that idea. It's like so elegant, of an experiment. Now, in the 1700s is when things started to really kick up. Like I said, smallpox kept coming back in epidemic waves. For instance, in the early 1700s, here's what Boston, Massachusetts did to treat people with smallpox. Doctors there prescribed 12 small bottles of beer every 24 hours for patients with smallpox.
Okay.
I like
Just
Boston.
Keep yourself inebriated and you won't pay attention to the... Yeah,
exactly. But actually, England is where all the science was happening. And this is where vaccines were born. In the early 1700s, it was kind of a well-known thing that in rural England, the farmlands, there were a group of people that were immune to smallpox during outbreaks. Instead, they just got a mild case of cowpox, which is a cattle disease. Now, these people would have some, scabs and mild fevers, but that's really about it. And these people were milkmaids, women who milked cows. All right. So in 1774, a farmer named a farmer called Benjamin Jesty, decided to play researcher for the day. So he took some oozing cowpox pus from a milkmaid, scratched it into the skin of his healthy wife and little sons, little boys. None of them got smallpox during the next outbreak.
At that time, was that a proven method or was this just pure experimentation?
Well, what this farmer did was just pure experimentation, but he had known that all these milkmaids for years and years would not get smallpox when everybody else around him did.
Okay.
So he just kind of put two and two together.
Yeah. Yeah, there must be something why they're not getting this disease.
I don't like the part that he just scratched his wife and son. It's like, you could have done it to yourself first, bro.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah. Yeah, you be the guinea pig for
I
it.
know.
Then you're really not going to like this next one.
Oh no.
So 20 years later, 1796, Edward Jenner, who was a doctor in the English countryside, took this idea to the next level. And he started doing experiments on people, proper experiments. So some were dangerous and by today's standards, ethically problematic in a major way, but really important, right?
Okay.
So like this experiment here. Since it was known that getting a fairly mild disease like cowpox from a sick cow or infected milkmaid could protect you against smallpox, Dr. Jenner decided to take pus from a cowpox lesion. This is the most I've ever said the word pus in my life. He took that pus from a young milkmaid, scratched it into the skin of an 8-year-old boy, kind of like the same experiment from before. Now, after a few days of being kind of sick, the boy fully recovered. Now, this next step is where it gets ethically problematic.
Okay.
Dr. Jenner then gave the boy smallpox intentionally,
Okay.
like a full dose. And it really could have killed such a young child because it was killing a lot of young children, right? But the boy didn't get smallpox, nor did any of the people he came in contact with.
So he had given him the small dose to vaccinate him.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to prove that the vaccination worked. So
Worked.
that's why he gave him the full dose of smallpox.
Yeah, that was the whole point. That's the eureka moment where he says, whoa, this actually works.
Yeah, but-
so
Try to do that in 2021. That
no, of course
it would
not.
never happen, right?
yeah, the thing about back then, there were no regulatory boards to
Sure.
report to, you
Right.
know. So this was Dr. Jenner's eureka moment. You know, he called it vaccinia after the Latin word for cowpox. Yeah, vaccinia.
And that's where the name started.
That's right.
Interesting. We're learning about vaccines today with John and how we got here, and we'll pick it up after Pat Benatar. Hit me with your best shot. Vaccines are our topic today in how we got here. And John educated us just before the break about back in England, what, 1700s you said?
The late 1700s.
Dr.
that's
Jenner.
right.
I want to think Bruce Jenner.
I know that's... when I was reading that, that's all I could think in my head.
And then he put a little smallpox into the skin, and then he grew up into this giant green thing. No. So 1700s, vaccine, the word vaccine came to be. And it was with smallpox where the major breakthrough came.
Yeah, smallpox was the bane of human society. And Dr. Jenner, though he didn't eradicate smallpox, he made it possible to later on, right? And the thing about Jenner, which is really interesting, is at that time, word was spreading globally that this guy in England had developed kind of a protection against smallpox. Okay. He freely shared the information that he knew and said, do it. Do it in your countries. We need to eradicate this. So he made no money off of this, right? Which is pretty fascinating because you would think,
He could have held on to that for sure. Yeah.
really could have, but he didn't because he wanted this thing eradicated. And from that point on, vaccines would be researched, developed, and administered, for a bunch of different diseases, as we know. Now, when you think about it, the vaccine we're taking now for coronavirus, we hear mRNA and all this kind of stuff, but it's essentially the same thing. Teaching our immune system to recognize an enemy and remember that enemy.
So I guess then technology hasn't really brought us anywhere with vaccines because what they came up with in the 1700s is still very effective today. Of course, the way it's administered is completely different.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's not a technology thing, but it's a human biological thing. We have not advanced, right? So the same thing that worked back then works
point.
right now.
Good point, yeah.
Except science can kind of figure things out a little faster now. It's pretty remarkable how fast we suddenly had coronavirus vaccines, right? Usually these things take years
Years,
and
yeah.
years.
Yeah. Well, they got to work a lot of different companies, pardon me, got to work very quickly all at the same time, right?
Sure. And it's pretty unprecedented because you think about, something like Edward Jenner back in 1796, hearing stuff about rural England farm maids, not getting smallpox, so he does an experiment. Well, the next major jump was polio.
Okay.
Right. I mean, it really just killed and crippled many, many children in the early 1900s.
I was going to ask when that was. That was as late as the early 1900s.
Yeah, I mean, it'd been around, but that's when they started to recognize what it was.
Relatively speaking, that's not so long ago,
Right,
is it?
exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, Dr. Jonas Salk developed a vaccine for that in the early 50s. So, we had things like that, MMR, which protects against measles, which is a huge, huge disease, right?
Yeah.
That was like only in the 70s.
Oh.
So a lot of these things that have been plaguing humans for centuries, as soon as Edward Jenner, developed this idea of inoculation and vaccines, boom.
But for the polio vaccine, that took 50
That took a long time.
50 years to develop that. So when you think about that, and then you think about how quickly they came out with Pfizer and AstraZeneca and Moderna, and that's really amazing how quickly they got it done.
Yeah, and the crazier thing is how we all suddenly know all these pharma companies.
Yeah.
It's like, I so want the Pfizer. Oh, I'm not going to have this. It's just ridiculous. They're kind of like hot tickets to concerts now.
Yeah. You say measles, that's the sickest, side note, that's the sickest I've ever been. It was my first year in Korea.
Oh, whoa.
Yep, and it was at Christmas time.
Oh.
And we had planned a ski trip, myself and my friends and my coworkers. We had planned a ski trip for the Christmas break. And then just before the break came, I got adult measles and pneumonia at the same time.
I don't think I've ever heard of anybody getting measles.
At the same time I got pneumonia. It was awful. It
Wow.
was
Nice.
very, very, very scary. And that was my first year in Korea. My first Christmas was in the
Hey,
hospital.
welcome, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
So you were never vaccinated?
I don't know what. I have no idea.
Yeah,
but
because I thought measles vaccines were for life, right?
I thought so. Like when you're a kid, you would get it once and then you're okay for the rest of your life.
they kept telling me adult measles, so I don't know if that's a different strain or
It's
a
gotta be.
different
Yeah.
form of
Yeah, I'm
something.
sure.
Yeah, I
I
have
see.
no idea, but that was a rough 2 weeks. I can tell you that.
It's so interesting that you also had a disease where we consider kind of eradicated because
Yeah.
of vaccinations, because I also had a disease that were thought to be, well, not eradicated, but at least you wouldn't get it in an advanced country like Korea. I had TB. I had tuberculosis.
Is that right?
Whoa.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Goodness
How
me.
was that?
It kind of just came like a cold, like a bad cold that wouldn't go away for a while.
How long did it take you to recover from that?
It's a funny thing. Tuberculosis medication, it takes a really, really long time. Minimum is 6 months
Is
you're
that
on.
right?
Wow.
Every day you're eating more than 13 like large pills just to get rid of it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I recall hearing something a few years back, 6 or 7 years, that some people were getting TB here in Korea.
Yeah.
Was that a thing? Is that when you got it?
That was when I got it, but it was
Oh.
mainly among like younger kids or elderly people who, whose immune system was a little
Right.
weak. Clearly, I was not taking care of my body because I think it was kind of breaking down a little bit in that sense. Like the immune system wasn't as healthy or working, and therefore that's what happened. That I had to stay in the hospital for a few days.
Yeah, I remember me too. I was a teacher at a hagwon at that time that I got adult measles and pneumonia, but I didn't know what was wrong, right? And I couldn't even see my body. Like I didn't know. All I knew is I was super sick. But I remember the hagwon owner, he was speculative, like, oh, is Steve taking time off when he doesn't really need to
right.
take time off? So
Yeah.
he came over to my apartment and he saw me. And I remember that day, he saw me and he said, oh my goodness, we need to take you to a hospital like right now. Apparently I was all red and covered in like blotches and
Oh
stuff.
my gosh.
The only place I could be was on my bathroom floor because it was so cool. So I would just lay on my bathroom floor because I didn't know what was wrong with me, right? But
And you never thought to go to the hospital all that
that's
time.
how stupid I am. Like I'll be on my deathbed. I'll be like, nah, I'm fine. I'll shake it off.
It might be like a guy thing, because I mean, all of us dudes have done something similar. We're sick and we don't really know. We go, it'll pass.
Thankfully, the owner
Yeah.
came and picked me up.
Yeah,
Who
exactly.
knows what would have happened, right?
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it there for the first hour of the program for today. Thanks for that, John. Really interesting information. Stick with us for the second. To finish up the first, it's Huey Lewis in the news. I Want a New Drug.